So this is quite a wild chart today for a lot of reasons. We've got the sun opposite the moon. We've got Mars opposite Saturn. So I want to talk a lot about Saturn in Aries retrogressing back through those first degrees opposite Mars. When we've got Venus conjunct Jupiter in Cancer, which is Jupiter's exaltation. Venus is quite happy there, especially being conjunct Jupiter. The two benefics together is something, especially in the exaltation of one of them. Fun fact, both benefics exalt in a water sign. Jupiter in Cancer and Venus in Pisces. Speaking of exaltations and mutual receptions, Mars is in Libra, which is Saturn's exaltation, and Saturn is in Aries, which is Mars's domicile. So they've got quite an interesting mutual reception going on there. The sun is in his rulership, his singular domicile of Leo. The moon is in Saturn's Aquarius. Mercury also in Leo, so you see a lot of communication front and center. A lot of people are speaking up and speaking out with Mercury entering Leo. It's been a loud week of people speaking their mind, and Mercury ruling that communication, and Leo being about dominance is a great word for Leo. The sun is so dominant in the sky. Any planet is near the sun. If the moon is near the sun, you can't see them because the sun dominates. Yeah, I mean, people just want to speak their mind right now. There's a lot of that going on with his Mercury and Leo trining Saturn and Aries. And Saturn falls in Aries, but falls are very interesting. Falls, exaltations, rulerships, and what it all means is really interesting. And when a planet falls, there's a lot of different interpretations of it. I don't think necessarily that a planet is weaker in its fall at all. I think a planet just behaves very differently in its fall. Think about the sun, right? The sun exalts in Aries and falls in Libra. So from Aries to Libra, the sun is quite warm. So from the exaltation to the fall, which is on the opposite end, and most planets, they've got their exaltations and their falls on opposite ends of one another. It's like it kind of turns on and turns off in a way and starts behaving differently. So the sun gets warmer in Aries, it's exaltation. And what's the sun all about, right? The sun's all about warmth. So the sun gets warmer in Aries, and then what happens in Libra? Oh, we love you, sun, you're so warm. And then, oh my gosh, the sun it's getting colder in Libra in its fall, right? So Saturn, think about, okay, so what is Saturn? Slow, meticulous, plotting. And then it enters Aries, and Aries being the first sign of the zodiac, the start, the go-getter. Saturn's like, okay, it's time for these plans, these calculations I've been making all this time. It's time for some things to start happening. And that spot that Saturn is straddling right now, it's been in the first degrees of Aries, the first couple of degrees of Aries for a couple of months now. Saturn entered Aries on May 25th. And shortly after that, right, Saturn enters Aries, and then immediately we get the LA riots. It's crazy how that's like, there's so much going on that's almost been forgotten about now, is how wild the LA riots are. And then, of course, they went a bit nationwide, but we had that. It amplified. The tribalism in the air is being amplified by Cancer, right? I mean, the racial tension is absolutely nuts right now. It feels like all over the world, right? Not just in America. America has its racial tension for sure. But in Europe, I mean, what's going on there in tribalism is insane. The migrant crisis in Europe, the UK, and Ireland, and Australia, and all over, it's been a thing for a long time. It's been known about. But when Saturn entered Aries, and then at the same time Jupiter enters Cancer, tribalism just gets ramped up. People really woke up to these problems, and people are speaking their minds. So yeah, Saturn in these first degrees of Aries is really, it's getting things started, right? So we had the LA riots. Then shortly after that, like right after that, Israel attacks Iran. the Middle East is always popping off, but this is in a completely, new way. Like as if the war and as if Gaza wasn't enough. Then it's like, okay, let's add Iran to that. Soon we'll see something between China and Taiwan. It's like, oh man. And then of course, I mean the migrant stuff in Ireland and the UK and Spain and all of Europe. We've got Germany trying to they're trying to send migrants into Poland, and the Polish citizens are fighting German cops. They're not fighting, but there are standoffs of sorts at the German-Poland border. It's over migrants. Yeah, I mean, things are certainly heating up. So that's what's interesting, right? So now that when Saturn entered Aries, things popped off in a big way. Now Saturn's exiting Aries, but retrogression is really about a planet interacting with a certain part of the zodiac with intention. They're repeating specific degrees of the zodiac on purpose. They're going backwards through the zodiac on purpose in specific spots. So retrogression is very significant. And then he's going to retrogress back through those first degrees of Aries. And then he's going to once again enter these first degrees of Aries later. So he's just grinding back and forth on this liminal space. And that's what's incredible, is this space between Aries and Pisces is nuts, because Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, Pisces is the last. So you have the beginning and the end right next to one another. It's the alpha and the omega right there. And Saturn is just going back and forth on those degrees right now. And that kind of thing only happens once every 30 years. That's not frequent. You'll live through Saturn going through these degrees a few times in your life. This happens once every 30 years. Saturn takes 29.5 years to transit the zodiac. So if you live to 90, it'll be 3 or 4 times. It's quite incredible, this space between Aries and Pisces. And Saturn being opposite Mars is interesting. And that, of course, right, that opposition relates to the opposition that is the full moon. The full moon, in case you don't know, is when the sun is opposite the moon, right? So the sun is in Leo, and Leo is opposite Aquarius. So when they're on the exact opposite degrees, the moon is full. But what's interesting, right, and what that means is that when the sun sets, the moon rises. There's always a light in the sky during the full moon. It's very cool. And the moon being a luminary at her full luminescence, it's not like it's super bright, but you can see, at night during the full moon quite easily. And that of course invites people staying up later, some sort of loony behavior during this full moon. You can think of Mars and Saturn in a similar way, that opposition, right? There's always one of them in the sky, and that's fascinating, right? If you look out, there's either going to be the sun or a moon in the sky. There's one or the other. There's never a time today when there's not going to be one or the other in the sky. The same is true for Mars and Saturn. As soon as Saturn sets, Mars is going to rise. So somewhere above you today, a malefic is in the air right above you. This dynamic mutual reception between Mars and Libra and Saturn and Aries is, I'd say it's quite ominous. This chart, it feels like something could pop off, and Saturn is going to be opposite Mars for the next week or so, in these really early degrees of Aries and Libra. And who knows what could happen? Today is certainly going to be an interesting day with this full moon energy in the air. And yeah, I hope you have a great day. That is a quick and dirty analysis of this chart. Until next time.